Hello, and welcome to this episode of the High Growth Equation, where we look at the formula for channel partner success. Today, we're diving into the topic of Agentic AI, what it is and how it's evolving, and why observability is critical as AI systems gain more autonomy. I am delighted today to be joined by Evan Unrue, our Chief Technologist for Data and AI. Evan, thank you so much for being with us. Perhaps you'd like to say a few words about who you are, your background, and what it is you're doing today with TD Synnex.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me, Lawrence. I'm the European Chief Technologist for Data, AI and Applications, and I run our Centre of Excellence, which is a team of solution architects operating around those technologies, primarily supporting our go-to-market teams.
Thank you, Evan. A very modest way of putting it, and I know that you're incredibly influential in helping partners take Agentic AI technologies to market. Let's start with the basics. What is Agentic AI? How does it differ from traditional automation or task-based AI?
If you think about what we did globally when ChatGPT hit the world by storm in October 2021, we all started talking to this magic box, but those responses that we got from the large language model were inputs and outputs. If you wanted to reason through a process, you had to drive it through every step of the way. Agentic AI effectively works on the premise that AI agents or personas that you're working with are goal-oriented, and it's going to work towards a goal, a number of steps in a workflow to achieve an outcome, and it's going to plan the steps it's going to take. It's going to utilize various tools. So that goal-oriented approach means that they can plan, they can reason through those steps, they can react to the plan being disrupted, and the idea is there's a feedback loop, so they learn in the process of how to optimize themselves for that task. So they're goal-oriented, they have reasoning capability, and rather than just inputs and outputs, we're now starting to see them being event-driven inside back office systems, for example, inside a business.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that, Evan. Great description there. Now, I know that you've worked with Agentic AI both professionally and personally. Could you share some real-world examples of how you've implemented it?
So let's start with the fun stuff, I suppose. I am a long-standing fan of sci-fi, and as such, I plough through Audible audiobooks like there's no tomorrow. So when I started to run out of books from my favourite author, I started to create manual workflows, but then when Agentic AI came to life in the open source world originally through Agentic AI, tools which would allow me to set the premise of a concept of a sci-fi novel I might like, and it would start to build out chapter by chapter a story. So that's one thing. In the professional setting, I think one of the most common scenarios that I'm seeing is the fact that we can now utilize unstructured data in workflows. So it might be proposal generation, having a knowledge around our vendors, our customers, our capabilities, our services, which can be incorporated into a workflow that could either deliver insight around content, or it can generate things like proposals, research, etc. So those are probably the low-hanging fruit areas which people are jumping onto. Anywhere that is unstructured content rich.
Brilliant, thank you, Evan. They're really fascinating ways of using Agentic AI, and I'm sure a lot of people will have a go at trying to do that themselves after this session. One of the key differences with Agentic AI is that it can take the initiative, as you've said. What does that actually look like in practice, though?
Agentic AI implies that these agents have agency, and all that agency is geared around the goal that they're set and the objectives. So generally speaking, when you create an AI agent, you give it a goal, you define the tools it can work with, you give it a persona. It's going to take initiative to achieve the outcomes as laid out within that goal and within those specific tasks. And that's really where the initiative, the agency, the executive function comes from. Traditional automation still very much has a place where there should be a rigid structure, but where you need that reasoning and that ability to deal with variability in a process or within content, this is really where that agency becomes important.
Really interesting. Thank you for outlining that, Evan. So with that level of autonomy, observability becomes critical, right? Why is it so important to have the visibility into what the agents are doing.
I suppose the simplest analogy to use is you wouldn't hire 10 interns to run your finance department and let them have at it for 6 months. There's potential impact to brand, reputation, liability if something really goes wrong. And in the same way, yes, we can do amazing things with AI, and the responses we get are so competent that it's very easy to trust everything an AI tells you or is doing. But that can be a bit of a smokescreen because you still run into challenges, maybe through bad prompts, maybe too much variability in a process where a step an agent could take either misaligns with the intended goal and it starts to drift off and do something different. So having that observability and traceability, the ability to in real time be notified, for example, if an AI is doing something or triggers something that is out of policy, or maybe it hits an ethical flag or whatever it might be, is pretty key. And in the same way where we have policies that govern how people work and access rights to systems, it's critical that we apply that same rigor to agentic AI. So really it's about protection and trust.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I have to say, I can definitely relate to that refinement piece. Also, in the last episode of the high growth equation, we talked about LLM jacking, where you have that observability to make sure that it's not doing something that it shouldn't be prompted to do.
Yeah, especially as these agents have access to tools that can access external systems. They're sitting in processes that could be repeated 1,000, 10,000 times a day at scale. So if we are dealing with bad and malicious actors that have the ability to exploit that system, you're not just dealing with the one time an LLM responded to you with some customer data it shouldn't. You're potentially dealing with it doing that repeatedly and at scale. So yes, very important to make sure that LLM security, observability, governance, control, and all the guardrails are very much in place. But also the zones where we deploy agents based on the risk classification of the environment it's working with.
Excellent. So, Evan, for partners actually deploying agentic AI, what tools or would you say practices can help ensure that as observability and governance are in place?
So there's a few. You've got tools like Governance from IBM, which helps guide around making sure it fits within compliance and guardrails and ethical standards. I would say the most prominent observability tools that I've seen come from the likes of AgentOps and LangFuse and others, where they're actually tracing the specific workflows of an agent, looking at the responses, looking at the tools they trigger, looking at the success rate of goal completion, number of retries. And I think we'll see more of that coming into mainstream enterprise tooling as we go forward.
Wonderful. Evan, thank you so much for taking the time today to go into agentic AI and explain what it is and how partners can leverage it. So if you're watching this, TD SYNNEX offers a lot of other ways of helping you get enabled around this topic. Check out our courses from our GSS team around AI. We also have our Destination AI program, which will help you get on board with the whole area of AI. Evan's available on LinkedIn, so feel free to follow him there. And until the next episode of the High Growth Equation, stay tuned. And thank you for joining.
Thank you.